Well, I can see an early question in the chat. I guess, I don't know if I'd call that the elephant in the webinar, but yeah, it's big news coming out this morning about H&A Group approving or proceeding with a bid to purchase by Platinum Equity, an LA-based venture capital firm, hoping to close that out by 2021, early 2021. We don't see any, H&A had a very segregated impact on Ingram Micro. We were a segregated fenced off area of H&A, and we expect that just to continue on with the Platinum Equity ownership, and we don't see expect any changes, especially down here in Australia, where we're pretty happy with our isolation in the family, and we're pretty happy with how things are going down here, and we don't expect any changes at all. All right, Robert, what do you think? I can see the attendee rate has slowed considerably. Shall we get started? What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
All right, so introducing Robert Crane, a highly experienced Microsoft training professional. I heard him present a couple of weeks ago around our SMB boot camps for sales and technical. They were fantastic sessions. If anyone in this attendee list joined those, they would have really appreciated those, I'm sure. So let's hear from Robert.
Excellent, thanks a lot, Jason. Welcome everybody along to this session on Autopilot. To give you a bit of an outline, we'll do a bit of a technical deep dive with myself for about 20-25 minutes. I'll throw back to Jason to give you some of the benefits that Ingram Micro will bring to the environment to help you roll devices out to your customers. And then we do have some time for a Q&A. But if you do have any questions, please, by all means, pop it in the chat there. We'll do our best to answer it. If not, we will look to do that at the end. So as mentioned, we're here to talk about Windows Autopilot. So at its core, we need to be thinking today, like most things in this environment, that times have changed. So the idea now is that we want to be able to deliver devices to customers in a way that it doesn't require it going through the hands of IT. So the traditional model generally has been for a customer to order a device, a PC, typically, for that to be sent or to be delivered to yourselves. Then as resellers, you would add value to that. You would install patches, updates, policies, and then rebox it and send it out to the customer. Now, given the health pandemic we're in, obviously that's going to be very difficult to do, especially the smaller that you are. You don't want a garage full of PCs sitting around waiting to be delivered to the customer or from the customer. So what we're looking now is to be able to deploy and manage devices without actually ever having to see them. Now, thanks to the Windows Autopilot service, this is now possible. So in essence, you can order from Ingram. They can ship the device, drop ship the device directly to the customer. The customer would simply open the device, log in with the credentials to their Microsoft 365 environment, and then the policies, the configuration would be applied to that device automatically, again, without you seeing or having to touch that device physically. Now, it doesn't end there. It would then continue on allowing you to manage that device for the life of that device without necessarily having to see it. Now, this requires a combination of services, and we'll have a look at those as we run through. So as mentioned, the old way, the traditional way, very much focused on-prem, has been to build a custom image. So you create an ISO, or a build that you would bring across using an imaging tool. And that means that it's going to take a lot of time. You're going to have the space to do it. It's also a delay from the customer ordering the device to them actually getting the device. And that can be very frustrating for customers who are used to, walking into the iTunes store or walking into the Apple store and buying a device and taking it home with them directly. Now, it also means challenges for the reseller because that's extra time, that's extra effort. And again, when it comes to updating this with the latest patches or the latest releases of software, that can be a very onerous task. So we're moving to this new method that I mentioned of basically a PC being drop shipped directly to a customer. The customer simply unpacks it, has that unboxing experience, opening it up for the first time, unwrapping the cellophane, getting that new PC feel, and then them opening it up, connecting to the internet, logging in using a business credentials from their Microsoft 365 environment. And once that happens, the device then is recognized. It then has policies applied to it. It then has any updates pushed to it. And in a matter of time, it is then ready to go. It is under management and has everything in a secure and stable state. Now, from a reseller's point of view, somebody has to do all that work, has to do all the work behind the scenes, setting up the config, setting up the deployments and the policies, and that's the value add that resellers can provide. Now, as mentioned, the idea here is that we now have a life cycle for a device where we don't need to physically touch or see the device anymore. So again, we go through a procurement, we deploy it, drop ship it straight out, and then once the login has been completed, the policies have been applied, the management, the monitoring can all be done remotely in a single panel that is provided to us through Microsoft 365 Endpoint Manager. And that'll allow us to take care of any problems, any issues, any patching, all of that can be done. And then when the device is retired, we've still got the ability, for example, to we could wipe the device. So basically, we could send it back to the Stone Age, wipe all the information off it. We could repurpose it. So what you could do is that, let's say that Betty is leaving the organization and Joe is taking her place, then basically we can repurpose that device remotely so that when it's given to Joe, he would open it up and go through that same out-of-the-box experience as though the device was new. So we can do and manage all of that through the whole process, including to retiring devices. Now, what we're seeing, obviously, is that with some of the benefits that the government's giving us around tax, is that we can now look at getting a lot of newer devices into the hands of users to take advantage of some of these new capabilities that come with things like Windows Hello for Business, the advanced BitLocker, some of the sizing and all that sort of stuff. But the main concept here is that you can now effectively and consistently deploy devices without ever having to see them, and basically taking the order or making the order on Ingram's site and having that shipped out to the customer directly. So what that means is that we're taking an optimized version of Windows 10 Pro that comes with the device natively. We can then deploy software to that, typically Office and third-party apps if we want. We can configure the settings, we can configure the updates, how it updates, when it updates, what ring it is, any additional features. So again, the features may include some of the services around Microsoft 365. It might include some of the data protection capabilities that, again, Microsoft does provide. And obviously, we can also synchronize the user's data through things like known folder move with OneDrive for Business. So what that allows you to do is to treat the device as truly a device, independent of the user. If the device is lost, if the device is stolen, if the device is upgraded, then the user can just, again, order another one, get another one in place without having to go through what has been a traditional challenge if their desktop PC has had issues. So what we're doing is, again, we're moving a lot of these capabilities as services, as policies into the cloud, and that provides a lot of benefits to the end user. But it also provides benefit to the reseller. It means, again, you don't have to go on site. You don't have to have the devices shipped to you. You don't have to, again, worry about all this. Much easier to manage when you don't actually have to touch the device, but you still have basically full control of how it's deployed. So this is all done through a service called Windows Autopilot, and Windows Autopilot is available to you provided you have Windows 10, 17, 03 or higher. Hopefully everybody currently has that. I think what I saw recently was 1903 is currently moving out of support. So hopefully everybody's got at least that version out there. But Again, make sure you do have 1703. Obviously, you're going to need things like Windows 10 Pro and Enterprise. So this is not something that will work with Windows 10 Home Edition, simply because you need a device or an operating system that can connect to Azure AD. Right, so as we all know, hopefully, Windows 10 Home does not have the capability to connect to Azure AD. Now, when we look at the subscriptions, we're going to need typically a Microsoft 365 Business Premium style subscription to do that, because a lot of the policies, the way that they are enforced and deployed to an endpoint, are done through Intune. So we basically need a subscription that includes Intune. So that is some of the ones listed there. So F1, E3, E5, some of the EMS subscriptions. And you'll notice down the bottom, you can also do it with Azure AD, P1 and P2, and Intune. So one of the core services that Autopilot relies on to deploy the policies to get the machine up to a level that a user expects is Intune. The one I would point you to is Microsoft 365 Business Premium. That includes Azure AD P1. That also includes Intune, and of course also includes Autopilot. Now, you'll get a copy of these slides afterwards, so the link there will give you more detailed information about exactly what you require. Now, the idea in pictures here is that you have your three parties here. You have your disti, you have yourself, and typically you have the end user. So what has happened is that a device has a unique ID. We'll talk about that shortly, but that unique ID identifies that device when it connects or communicates to the cloud. Typically, what had to happen is that device ID was captured by the supplier, given to the IT admin, who would then upload that into the appropriate portal for the customer. So when the customer logged in, that would be identified. They would also upload a configuration profile. So the configuration profile, for example, determines whether the user has to answer questions around whether they want Cortana, those sort of issues. They can all be handled with a configuration file. Then once those two things are complete, the vendor would then ship the device directly to the employee. The employee would open the device and it would connect to the internet and would then ask them to log in. It would identify that machine thanks to the uploaded ID, and then it would deploy from there. Now, what has happened, the new approach now is that people like Ingram can now automatically upload that device ID for you. So that removes yet another step that you as a reseller have to do. The Ingram people will speak to exactly how that is accomplished via their portal and so on. But again, the machine is uniquely identified, and that unique identification is uploaded into a portal. That portal is what the end user connects to when they receive their device. Now, the other good thing here is we can also harvest these IDs from existing machines. So if you do have a range of Windows 10 machines, you can harvest or collect those IDs in a very simple and easy manner. For example, you can just run a PowerShell script that will spit that out to a CSV file and manually upload it if you want. If the machines are already Azure AD joined, then they will automatically be harvested for you. So there's lots of ways to get existing machines into the portal. Certainly my advice to do that for all devices that you may have already, just going to make deployment and management going forward much, much easier. So again, there's a number of requirements there. Again, you'll get access to the slides afterwards, so the link is there for you to have a look at. Now, the idea here is we want to provide an environment where it's secure out of the box, everything's up to date, and we can deploy this as quickly as possible the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, and so on. So it gives us this capability with things like Microsoft 365 Business Premium. It allows us to manage not only the deployment with things like Windows Autopilot, but we've also got the capabilities, if we're using Intune and Endpoint Manager, to manage our phones, our tablets, our laptops, and our desktops. So the modern approach to management is to do it with a service like Intune, because the traditional models of things like group policy are limited to an on-prem environment, a local area network, and something controlled by a domain controller. So the modern world in an environment where people are working from home, they're buying machines on their own volition. We need to be able to manage this anywhere that those devices are. Now, if you do want to administer Autopilot, there are a number of different ways that you can do it. You can use the Microsoft Store for Business. That has been the very traditional way to do it, a nice graphical user interface. There is the ability to do it through your Partner Center, and you can also do it through the Microsoft 365 Business Admin Portal. But my approach and my recommendation to you would strongly be to use the Microsoft Intune portal to do that, because it's going to give you more options and more flexibility and is a more technical insight into the settings here. So if you go to Microsoft Endpoint Manager, so that's at endpoint.microsoft.com, select the devices on the left, you'll see then you have all your options here around the enrollment type. So we can enroll obviously iOS, Android, and so on. In there, you will find the option to do Windows enrollment. When you select that and scroll down, you will find that there are the Autopilot deployment options. So you have the deployment profiles, as I spoke about. You have the actual devices that are registered to Autopilot. And importantly, you'll notice that we also have the ability to have a connector for your local AD. So if you are synchronizing identities, if you do have a hybrid environment, yes, you can use Autopilot with this. There's a little bit more work. It's a little bit more complex because, again, you're sort of straddling two different types of technologies, but it certainly is possible to do that. And in that case, you may need to set up that connector for your on-prem AD. Now, if we go into the profiles, what we need to do is we need to create a profile for our users. So again, what happens is they'll open the box, they will log in using their credentials, and then this profile will kick in, which you as a reseller have configured at the back end. It's pretty simple. You'll see here that we can automatically hide the software terms. We can do the same with privacy. We can determine whether the user account is an administrator or a standard account. Now, I know many people like to remove the administrator privileges for machines that are delivered or bought from providers, so that the user is only a standard user. We can do this directly with Autopilot. The really good thing about that is because it's policy based, it means that when the machine leaves the environment or leaves the tenant, that will mean that the standalone user will also go back to being a normal administrator, so it can be used as normal. All right, so you've got this capability to control the user and their permissions level. You can again turn that on or off if you want. You can also do white glove out of the box, which gives you more customization. You can customize the language if you want, the keyboard, and also you can apply a naming template. So if you want to call the PC 00-whatever, you can set up a naming convention so you have consistent naming through your organization. Now, as I mentioned, you can register existing devices, right? So you can take machines that already exist in the environment, and you can run this PowerShell script, and that will grab the information in the CSV file. You can then upload that into that same portal to tell the environment, yes, these machines are already out there. If you have those machines already Azure AD joined and they're capable, they will already appear in the portal for you. So again, you do have this manual option if you need to, but typically it's all automatic. Now, what we've got here on the screen is an example of the information, the device ID that is captured and put into a file, CSV file, and uploaded into the environment. So as you can see, it's typically a device serial number, a product ID if required, and a hardware hash. The hardware hash obviously identifies that device as unique. Now, this CSV file can have multiple entries, so you can have as many devices as you want and upload a single CSV file if you want. This is the file that is created when you run that PowerShell script on the endpoint that may not yet be included. Very, very simple, very straightforward. And again, there's a link there for you to reference when it goes to adding, devices manually into the environment. Now, once I add a device manually into the, or once the device is in the environment, you'll see here that I'm able to go in and view the devices that are available. Now, you'll see that I have, half a dozen or so devices that are already registered. You'll see their serial number, the manufacturer. So you'll notice here that I've got Microsoft machines and a Dell machine, different models, so it will identify that for you. You can also apply a tag, so maybe using asset tags or locations or something. You can also tie in a purchase order so that you can refer back for warranty information if you need to. And what we can also do here under the profile status is you can actually see in the top line there, you have the ability to assign that machine directly to a user. Now, what that means is that if it is assigned to a user, once that machine obviously is reset, does an autopilot reset and reboots, it will not require the user to log in. It will be set up ready for them to go at first login. So they won't have to go through this idea of setting it up. It will just automatically provision for them, provided you assign a user. So if you want to, you can take a device from someone like Ingram and you can nominate which person it is being delivered to, which identity in Microsoft 365 it is being delivered to. And when they open that box, it'll ask them obviously to connect to the internet. Once it's done all that and completed its initial process, it will then be ready for them to log into Azure AD directly. And again, if you want to, you can do it so that they log into a local AD as well. A little bit more work, but it can be done. So you'll see at the top across there, you'll see there's an import and an export. So if you want to import your CSV from a PowerShell script that you've run to capture the details, you can also export the information if you want for additional records. So again, it gives you that capability. Once these machines are autopilot registered, they'll appear in Intune, they'll appear in the endpoint manager, the device management. They will then take the compliance policies, the configuration policies that have been set up and apply things like the Microsoft baseline. So the way they're managed in future will be through these policies from Endpoint Manager. So an idea from the process would be the user would nominate their language and the keyboards. They would connect to the internet once they've received the device. So at this point here, they are prompted to identify themselves if you haven't already basically done that. So once they've identified themselves, the machine will continue on and it will take them basically to their desktop as you see. So the only thing that user has had to do is put in their login and their credentials. Everything else has been provisioned for them automatically. Now, once they get to the desktop and it's Azure AD joined and configured appropriately, what will happen is that the policies from Endpoint Manager will now kick in and you can now apply security policies and applications will be rolled out to it and deployed and so on. So again, this is only the beginning of what is sort of happening in the background, but from a user's point of view, they no longer need to, have the machine and worry about things being installed. It can all be done remotely, including third-party applications as well, if you wish. And the idea is, again, that the user can get on with their day, can start working with stuff, but as a reseller, you can deploy this without touching it. And the value add from the reseller's point of view is what's configured on the back end. So how the policies are applied, the updates, all of that configuration is the value add that you add to the service. So really the idea here is that it should be as easy as you register a device with Autopilot. Now that can be done by the good people at Ingram. That can also be done automatically if the machines are Azure AD joined, or it can be done manually if you want to. So we'll come to the bit now shortly where we talk to Ingram about how this is going to happen automatically when you purchase the device from them. You can then choose to have a user-driven profile, again, whether they log in or you actually nominate which person it's going to be deployed to. It will connect to the internet and it will boot, and you will then have the user identify themselves. All that information will be downloaded, and that will then put that device under management. So at its core, Windows Autopilot is a service that allows Windows 10 devices to be automatically joined to Azure AD for you. So rather than having to do that manually, you can use Autopilot to do that automatically. You can also do a hybrid join to a domain as well if you want. A little bit more work, but it can be done. And then the idea here is that Once that process has been complete, the autopilot hands off to Endpoint Manager to continue on and apply the policies that have been put in place. So it's a relatively simple approach to doing it. Again, you just need the appropriate machine, Windows 10, which hopefully everybody's got, a latest release, and we need the device IDs up there and that policy and those config options that I have showed you. So what I'll do now is I'll hand over to Jason to speak about what the value add that Ingram Micro can bring when you purchase these devices and roll them out to your customers.
Thanks, Robert. Excuse me, we've certainly come a long way from when I remember rolling out XP when I was working at a large bank 15, 20 years ago. That was a far more onerous task than it looks like it is now. And I'm very thankful for this new process. So it opens up possibilities for our partners in the reseller space, and Ingram want to try and make this as easy as possible to allow our partners to be involved and as hands-on as they want to be, or as not hands-on as they want to be. We've got some attendees here today who I'm sure are customers of Ingram on the cloud marketplace, customers of Ingram that are more traditional around the hardware procurement, and maybe both. So we've tried to cater for both those types of customers by making autopilot services available from Ingram via the cloud marketplace and from a traditional purchase order mechanism. And I'll just run and touch on both of those quickly. Please throw any questions into the chat if they come up, and if you've got any questions about what Robert has presented so far, please put some questions in there too. Ingram has been working with Autopilot for well over 12 months now. We've got many customers using Ingram services to register their Autopilot devices prior to shipment, which allows them to, as Robert's pointed out, the IT departments at the end user don't need to touch the device. The devices don't need to go to the resellers or partner's office for some type of hand holding or touching process, whether it be loading some software or other sort of physical task. It can ship directly out of Ingram's warehouse to wherever that end user might be, which these days could be anywhere, and more likely a home address than an office, although we are starting to get back to the office a bit more now, I think. Anyway, let's have a look at how you guys can order Autopilot services from Ingram. Robert, if you could move forward. This is our Ingram Cloud Portal mechanism for purchasing Autopilot. For those familiar with the Cloud Portal, it's a simple search for Autopilot up there in the search bar, which brings you one product from Ingram on the Cloud Portal, which is Windows Autopilot. It's a simple buy now button to initiate that process. We offer, there is a cost to Ingram doing this Autopilot device registrations for you. We have tried to make it simple, but there is a bit of a tasks that need to be done. So there is a cost, but we do waive that cost for all our Cloud Portal customers. So if you're an Ingram CSP customer using us for all your Microsoft licensing needs, you can have Windows Autopilot registrations done for you for zero cost. But you can still do it if you're not a CSP partner, but there's a $5 charge for us to perform that Autopilot registration for you. I'll move on to the traditional method. If you are working with Ingram from a traditional aspect in terms of buying your hardware, if you could move forward, Robert, to the next slide. Oh no, we're going to look at what we're offering from so these are the products, yes, sorry. So these are what we're selling from a traditional sense when you order your machines from Ingram. So you can buy, as you know, Ingram are distributors of many different end user compute devices, but as long as they're running Windows 10, build 1703 as we saw, you can have us perform that Autopilot registration for that device, and Ingram makes it consistent. There is the opportunity to have the vendor do some Autopilot registration for you, but you will find that from vendor to vendor, it may differ the experience as to what they can do, how they charge, what the process is. By having Ingram perform this task, it's consistent regardless of it's Microsoft Surface, Dell, Lenovo, HPI, are probably the biggest four that come to mind. Apologies if I've overlooked one. So we do have different prices for different situations. If you've got an end user, an end customer that wants to have a bit more control over their autopilot registrations, and they still want that, give me that file to upload, that means that we'll run that script on the device that Robert referred to in our warehouse before that device goes out, and we'll provide that file to you so you can provide that to your customer. And that's probably the most onerous method to do an autopilot registration from our perspective, hence the $10 charge. What we prefer is for either us or you to do that device registration. It's a far simpler process. Our preference is actually for Ingram to do it, leaving you free to do other tasks within your business. And that's, as you see, that's that $5 charge. That's similar to what you see over on the cloud marketplace. I know Robert didn't touch too much on that white glove, but from what I heard earlier, but there is that option to say, well, yeah, want the device registered, but also let's get all those security policies and those software downloads done before it goes out to my end user in my organization at the end customer. So Microsoft did give that a label of white glove. I think they're moving towards maybe a phrase of pre-provisioning is something that I heard. But that's really is the pinnacle from my perspective of what Autopilot can offer, which is literally all the configuration work done upfront, applied to the devices, and it's shipping straight from Ingram to the person that's using the device and making it a really easy, simple process. Without that white glove step, there is the potential for that person to log on for the first time and then to receive the screen that says, okay, we're setting stuff up for you, and it's sit like that for an hour or 2 hours or even 3 hours, depending on bandwidth speed and how much data it has to bring down. So I really recommend looking at that option if you want to pursue the autopilot experience. Robert, I believe that is my last slide that I was going to talk to. Oh, one more. Yes, that's right. So we also are offering a package service for autopilot services. So if you really want to be able to offer this autopilot experience to your customers, but really not have to do much at all, we've got 3 layers of a modern deployment service that we can offer you. Per device, you can buy that device with a basic modern deployment service, our essentials package, and our premium package. So basic is basically what we've been talking about with just the device registration, and we're providing you that file that the end user can, or that you can upload to the Autopilot portal via one of those methods that Robert referred to earlier. Then moving into the essentials is we'll register to the device, but we'll also do a default profile so that we can apply that to the devices initially. Moving up to the premium at $25 per device, it's a really full service offering, I guess you might call it, where we sort of look at every sort of aspect to make this a really easy and smooth process for that person that's receiving that device, and we take care of it. It's the registration, the white gloving, so preparing that device prior to shipment. If you want some asset tags or labels applied to the device, we do that. If you'd like a, hey, welcome, if it's say new devices are being issued to new starters, welcome to the organization, etc., whatever information you'd like to say, the help desk phone number is this, whatever you like, we can put that in the box as well. So fully customized service there with that premium package. And we're getting a lot of strong interest out of customers for these packages. So it just, it just takes the headache out of thinking what customer has what service. Our partners are this pushing their customers into a certain area and just running with that, and we're having a lot of success. So that is my last slide. Do we have any questions coming through?
Yeah, we do have some questions coming through, so let's tick these off. So the first question here is, what happens to a device once it's uploaded to Azure AD? If the business factory resets it and sells it, do we have to manually delete the device? You certainly have that option if you want. You have full control over how it appears in the portal. So you can manually go in and delete the device, but it will age out after a period of time, which you can determine. So if the device doesn't check in with the console after, say, 30 days, 60 days, it will then be removed from the console. You can control that, or if you want to remove it completely, you can go in and do that from the console. So again, best practice is for you to retire it, but if you don't, then you can certainly do that in the portal without actually having to touch the machine. Next question is, if the device is stolen and wiped by a malicious party, will it still try to sign in? Well, the idea is it won't try and sign in, because if it is wiped, it needs to basically join Azure AD and do all that sort of stuff. So again, remember, it has to be configured to be an out-of-the-box experience. Wiping the device and reloading Windows doesn't put it back into the out-of-the-box experience. And again, the idea would be that if the machine is obviously stolen, then you would make sure that you prevent that device from connecting to the environment. You know the serial number, you know the configuration, so you could then block that as well. So it does have that security capability, but it's not going to come up with that if it's taken or stolen by a malicious third party, because it's still protected by Azure AD credentials, hopefully two-factor authentication, and whatever you configure in the back end to make sure that it doesn't, it's not compliant. So again, no need to worry about that. Question about licensing for Windows volume licensing and the Microsoft Store. I would suggest that the best people to speak to, because licensing can be quite involved and ifs and buts, is to contact the good people at Ingram Micro and ask them specifically about that question, because you're sort of mixing the licensings here. So we probably don't have enough time or enough knowledge necessarily on the call to go into that in great detail. But again, give Ingram a call or an email and get them to clarify exactly how it all fits in together. I don't think it's a problem, but generally, like I said, volume licensing is slightly nuanced. So again, speak to the licensing experts at Ingram, I would suggest. If the need to install the MSI file, can this be done easily? Yes. Again, the idea is that and this is another question a little bit further down, is that you can install standard applications, Office, Adobe, those sort of things that are well-known applications inside the portal with the standard tools, but you can extend that down to being able to run PowerShell scripts after the fact. So again, if you need to, if you have a super unique app, you can again craft a PowerShell script that will go in and run the installation any which way you want and deploy that as part of the process as well. So it does support that, but hopefully the majority of the apps that you're deploying will be those sort of standard apps for people.
Robert, Robert,
Yep.
For those that might be familiar with the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit or the SCCM, would you say that the application deployment is comparable? Like what you can deploy on those tools can also be done in the Intune environment?
Correct. So Config Manager is the on-prem equivalent or the on-prem integration, typically for the enterprises, that would allow you to roll out applications and manage devices. There's a big push to integrate that. So again, all of that is being integrated. All those technologies are being integrated together to make it easy. But generally in SMB, we don't see Config Manager out there. It's usually a standalone install for most people. So, but it can be done. That's the answer. Is there any option to display some form of welcome and progress? Yes. So again, you can configure how that appears to the end user, whether they see that. So remember, it's sort of two processes here. One is the Windows Autopilot, which is the joining to Azure AD, getting the machine onto the tenant. Then once it's on the tenant, it picks up the endpoint policies to deploy applications, secure it, to configure the device. Okay, now the autopilot stuff obviously has to complete its process. There is the ability to put in progress and what it's actually doing to let the user know if you wish to do that. Generally, it's very quick because the machines are fairly new. There's not a lot that needs to be changed. They just need to be joined to the domain and then they're off to the races. So the Windows Autopilot generally is very quick. The deployment of the apps and the policies, again, depends on how much data you're pushing down to it, where the data is coming from. But generally, again, that is pretty quick. But obviously, it depends on the amount of applications and configuration. But the autopilot self stuff is generally very, very quick. There was a question around the fact if there's no internet. So the idea is when the user opens the machine and there's no internet, well, the autopilot generally is not going to be able to complete because it requires the device to confirm itself to the internet to then join Azure AD and all that sort of stuff. So really, in our modern world today, the assumption is that we have the internet, especially when we start initially configuring the machine. So the autopilot stuff is very dependent on having connection to the internet. Now, after that, once we've done autopilot and the policies from Intune around deployment of the applications and the policies, again, they will dribble in the background. So during that process, if the internet is lost or the machine is shut down, again, it will just pick up from where it was last time. So again, autopilot, very dependent, for obvious reasons, on the connection to the internet, but it is very short. After that, the additional policies from Endpoint Manager on how the device is configured and the software deployments will require the internet, but if the internet is interrupted or the machine is shut down, they will simply continue on when the machine is next available, when the internet is next available, because again, this is a concept about the policy. So every time the machine checks into the service, once it's Azure AD joined, it will say, do my local policies match the policies that I've been requested to have from the cloud? If they don't, then it will take actions, and it will do that typically in a silent manner in the background, independent of what the user's doing on their machine. So again, autopilot is dependent on the internet initially, but it is a short period of time. After that, the apps will continue on when the bandwidth is available there. All right, so from what I see, that is all the questions, and I would obviously encourage anybody who has further questions now is to type them in so we can answer them. Otherwise, obviously talk to the good people at Ingram Follow-Up. We'll make sure that the slides are made available to you. Jason, what's the best method for people to go about getting more information about some of the stuff we've spoken about, or learn more about autopilot and how they can get it up and running for their customers?
You have the traditional methods of assigned contact points for relay customers. You might have a relationship manager assigned to you, which you can work with. Our customer service team could also help you. We have a services mailbox, services@ingrammicro.com.au, that comes into my team, which we will certainly assist and get inquiries to the right place if it's not just about the services aspect of autopilot. There's people like June Lee in our team who are very knowledgeable around autopilot and how to make the most of it. And June does specialize in our Microsoft Surface and HP desktop equipment, but we've also got those people in the Lenovo and Dell teams as well. So if you've got any inquiries, the team at Ingram are aware of autopilot, and they were aware of the people within the organisation that are best to speak to regarding whatever inquiry you might have. I did notice a question around in the chat about how long does it take to get a machine out of the warehouse if the question related to that premium service in particular, which is the full service one, which you would expect would be the longest amount of time out of all those service offerings. Worst case scenario, it's a 24-hour extension from if you weren't getting those services going out on the truck versus you are getting those services 24 hours later, it goes out on a truck. That's our SLA on that. There are times where we exceed that considerably by getting it out same day. There are times where extreme volumes do come in. We may push past that, but we'll definitely be in contact and communicate any delays that we're having with any particular order. Some people might not want to say that, but I think it's important to be upfront with our customers about what we can do. It's we get through a lot of machines in our config center every day, and we've got a pretty good track record. Was there any other questions? I thought there was some other questions.
The only other one that I saw that jumped out at me was probably someone wanting to see a demonstration of hybrid Azure AD joined with basically autopilot. The answer is that's, again, not a simple process. in essence, what you do is you create a package from your domain that you then upload into Intune, and then that will sort of push the policy for Autopilot and this domain join at the same time. So there's a bit of config on your domain to grab those credentials, put it into a secure package. And my advice to you is, if you want to see that, is to go and look at the Microsoft videos from the past Ignite. So they've got a lot of those sort of things in the demos done in that. There's plenty of examples of that. My comment on that is that in the SMB, you need to, I believe, be looking to move away from an on-prem domain controller. Hybrid configurations are not generally recommended because you are trying to integrate an older style technology on-prem domain controllers, which are using group policy, which is not aware of things like Intune. So if you're not very careful, you can get overlaps with policies and lots of confusions, because you've got policies coming from group policy, policies coming from Intune and Endpoint Manager. So if you can, I would suggest that moving to a completely modern environment is a much better bet than trying to continue to use a hybrid configuration, and that should be something you should be looking at. But if you really want to do it, it can be done, but just be aware that it is more work, more configuration, and can cause more conflicts because, again, of those two different sources of information is coming. Plenty of information from Microsoft on that, doing that, laying it all out, and demos in videos. And I'd point you to, like I said, the Ignite sessions that Microsoft has provided recently as the best place to actually see that in action. All right, so I don't see any other questions there that have come through, so I suppose we'll give people a last option to put anything in there that we can answer right now.
I reckon I saw a couple. Bloatware. Is there a recommended way to remove the HP bloatware?
I have to scroll down. That'd help. Yeah.
Yeah, like HP.
So is there any option to? Oh, we got that one. What's we got here? Do we have any instructions or demo? So yes, that's the hybrid join. That was the. There are links to do that. Any recommended way to remove the HP bloatware? So there is a script, and I think it's called something like Reclaim Windows 10. If you do a search for Reclaim Windows 10, effectively that is a script you can run that will remove, all those sort of options. Again, I would suggest you speak to the good people at Ingram about obtaining machines without those additional items on there if you want. We talked about that one. Third-party apps. So remember that Autopilot doesn't set up the applications, right? Autopilot's job is to join effectively to Azure AD. Once it joins Azure AD, then the endpoint manager policies kick in. So Windows Autopilot basically is the beginning of the process of joining the machine to the new environment, from which the policies in that environment can be applied to the machine. Those policies allow the application and the installation of third-party software, and the answer is yes, it can be done. Autopilot can provide shared drives and mappings. Absolutely, as I mentioned, anything that is not in the environment, again, is done with PowerShell. And I will reiterate that Autopilot doesn't do the configuration. They're the policies that are an endpoint manager. So Autopilot is the beginning of the application of the policies that have been set in Endpoint Manager to manage the devices, to configure them, to do the security. Okay, so it's a combination of both. So Autopilot, like I said, is largely about doing the automatic connection to Azure AD, after which the policies in Endpoint Manager can be deployed. Will the internet be required for a new device if the white glove deployment service from Ingram is bought and done beforehand? At the end of the day, you're going to need connection to the internet, right? Modern device management in any way, shape, or form requires some connection to the internet. Now, it doesn't necessarily require a full-time connection to the environment, okay? So the idea here is that it is going to require that connection at some point in time. So you can't generally expect to be able to manage the device and continue to push out policies and configurations without connection to the internet at some point in time. So yes, it can go offline for a point in time. And again, if you take a machine that was configured and then you join it with the internet and it runs for a few days and then you remove the internet, well, then anything that needs to be added after it's been off the internet for a while will just depend on, again, when he changes. So it's only going to be the deltas effectively. Autopilot for out-of-the-box devices. I know some brands, HP, that provide a hardware ID to add the device to Intune policy. How many other brands allow for this, so we know which brands we can purchase? Again, I would suggest to you that you speak to the good people at Ingram. They'll be able to tell you specifically which brands provide that. As mentioned, I think, Jason, you said that obviously it's the Microsoft devices, HP, Lenovo. I'm sure you've got a list of all the devices there that support Autopilot from your side.
Yep, absolutely. So I think I want to add to that list would be the Dell portfolio.
Dell's another one, yep.
Yeah, as my feeling is that that question is very appropriate in the fact that HP do it, so who else does it? And it is inconsistent. Different manufacturers are at different stages of their autopilot support and integration, and that's where Ingram can make that a more consistent experience across the board. I can't answer that question specifically. I don't know who else is like at the HPI capabilities, but I do know that regardless of what the vendors or manufacturers do on their side, Ingram just take care of the gaps, so the experience to our partners is identical regardless of the manufacturer of the device.
Okay, so again, speak to the good people at Ingram for some specifics around that. How does Microsoft envisage service providers charge for this service? Well, at the end of the day, you charge for the value that you add. All right, so if a customer buys a machine from Harvey Norman or JB Hi-Fi, again, that machine would have to be Azure AD joined and go through whatever else needed to be done. So again, this is giving you the capability to deploy these devices quicker, faster, more securely out of the box to manage them better over a lifetime, no matter where they are. So I think a lot of it is around you coming up with the value statement. Now, the value statement used to be the on-prem connect the machine. So really it's that same model applied, to this new environment. So a lot of it is going to be very similar to what you've done. Again, the idea is it's quick, it's convenient, it's more secure. You basically can ensure the devices meet a level of compliance before they're used. So for example, you can define that a device have BitLocker encryption on its disk before it's allowed to connect to Azure AD and access corporate information. So again, this is adding value in that if customers do store corporate information on a machine, the machine will be encrypted at rest so that if it is stolen or lost, that information will remain secure. So again, I think it gives a lot more options for the capabilities of resellers, but it does require obviously a step back and thinking where the value statement is, but there is a lot of value in being able to deliver these devices securely to a customer over the lifetime that they can be managed for as well, that you really couldn't do on-prem anymore. So the idea with the white glove process, again, there's plenty of links. So if you do a search for Windows Autopilot white glove, it will take you through what is involved. But again, think of a white glove basically more around a custom image. So the standard Autopilot takes a standard Windows 10 Pro image and applies that, or basically configures that. Think of a white glove as a customized image with maybe certain drivers, certain applications, those sort of things that can then be applied to that environment as well. Okay, so again, we're sort of running out of time here, so we want to make sure that we're respectful of your time. So just do a quick search for Windows Autopilot white glove, or again, have a chat to the good people at Ingram. They'll let you know exactly what's involved, what has to be done, and again, what you need to do from your side to go through with the white glove option. How locked down is the sign-in initial setup of the computer? It's locked down up to whatever you configure. That's the whole idea. The configuration is up to you, right? So again, if you want users to go through the Windows, PIN code thing, you can. If you don't want them to go through that, you can control that. That's the whole thing. You can determine how locked down, in inverted commas, you want to be able to control that. And again, you control whether they can create a local account and all sorts of things. Remember, it doesn't have to be a machine that is purchased new from Ingram. You can take an existing machine and you can provision that into the environment by capturing those autopilot details. All right, so again, the idea here is all of that configuration is back up on the reseller to make those decisions as to what level they want to go to. All right, for white glove, is TPM module required? So I'm not sure there's a machine you can buy these days that doesn't have TPM on it. TPM is going to be required for things like Windows Hello for Business. It's going to be typically required for BitLocker. So again, it's more the policies after the fact. So Autopilot, again, is just joining to Azure AD, but if that joining requires Windows Hello for Business or a PIN number or whatever, then TPM is required. However, I would suggest to you that it would be rare to find a machine these days that doesn't have TPM involved with it. But again, speak to Ingram about the requirements for TPM with the white glove, but remember that the TPM stuff is generally going to be controlled by the policies after Autopilot. It's really only going to be needed for the identity configuration, and if that's required, you know, the user for Windows Hello for Business or whatever, then yes, you will need a TPM configuration to do that. When the C-suite just must have their pretty toy, how much would Autopilot work for Macs? Well, Windows Autopilot is only for Windows machines. It's not for Macintosh. That's the whole idea. Windows Autopilot will automatically join Windows machines to Azure AD and apply the policies. Macintoshes at the moment, and iOS and Android, do not support any sort of autopilot, or the rumor is, however, that it will come to those devices, but for now, it's only Windows machines. Now, once the Mac, iOS, Android is Azure AD joined, it will then kick in and take the policies from endpoint managers. So again, you need to separate the concept of Windows Autopilot, which is simply the Azure AD join component, and all the other policies around configuration, compliance, and so on that are then launched once you've got Azure AD connection. So again, if I took a Windows 10 machine and I manually joined it to Azure AD without using Autopilot, then all those configuration policies deployment would kick in anyway. So Autopilot just simplifies that initial connection to Azure AD for me. Well, again, there's a question about understanding if the device without TPM2. I don't believe that is the case. Every machine that I have ever seen that has TPM has always worked. But again, you can check the specs, you can talk to the good people at Ingram. I can't tell you exactly TPM2 versus TPM1, but I've never had an issue and I've never seen anybody have an issue with TPM. So I don't believe there is any limitation on it. But again, if it's in reference to the white glove stuff, then I would suggest, again, take the opportunity to speak to Ingram directly, get that clarified. That's probably the best that I can offer at this stage as we look to round up. All right, I think I've scrolled all the way down now, Jason. I've covered off all the questions. Is that what you see?
I would agree, 100%.
All right, so any closing words there or follow up for people? And we can look at ending the webinar then.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I think it was jam-packed, more than we thought. Thanks for those excellent questions. It really helped dive into some more aspects. But we will wrap it up because we are a couple of minutes past. We will endeavour to reach out to everyone that joined today to make sure we've covered up all your queries and how Ingram can help and get Autopilot as a service that you can offer your customers in an easy fashion. So once again, thanks again, and we'll catch up with you soon.